All right, so today we're going to be looking at some model prep initially. Here we have a metal piece. This is a Privateer Press. It's actually an exclusive for the Mini Crate line. What we're going to do is just put this arm on and check for some mold lines. Probably going to do that with a coat of primer. Already did the model cleanup with a little soap and water. Not a complicated process, but it's super necessary. A lot of times people skip it. If you're going to take the time to paint it up nice, and I think we're going to take that kind of time here, it really does lend it, I don't know, pay it forward kind of. If you don't take the time now, your paint starts peeling or flecking, and on metal pieces like this, it's already kind of prone to that happening. You're not going to have a great time. So, a little soap, a little water, nothing special, just detergent from the sink, good to go. We're gonna first start with putting our little arm on here. One of my favorite things, especially when assembling metal pieces, use some of this Bob Smith Industries Instaset. Helps the glue dry pretty quickly. Because we're not working with plastic, here we're just gonna use some super glue. Everybody has their own opinions on what kind of glue to use. If you have an opinion on it, you're probably right. Just use that. I like this gel control because you manipulate a little bit, also utilize it for some gap filling. Here we have just a little bit of excess, so it's kind of sandwiching a little. Use my glove here to take some of that excess off. I want a little bit, not a lot. Put the weapon in place. Seems to be a nice balance of both. And then I'm not going to use this as a spray. I'm actually just going to unscrew the lid and take it off here. I have the just the end of this little tip here. Just touch that right to the glue. And that's it. It'll dry pretty darn quick. A little paper towel into the mix here. Dry up any of that excess. There won't be much excess, but any of that extra catalyst that could be seeping into the recesses, and it will flow. Keep things pretty tidy. And I'm going to use one of my nicer new bases here, but in the short term, I think we'll take something with a cork that's been kind of loved a little bit. Put a bit more abuse here. I think this would be a much better choice for priming the piece. It'll prevent dirtying up a nice and new piece too soon. So I think to start out with, we'll just use our airbrush. We got a little Infinity CR Plus. Quite dirty, but just seems to be the way things are. Okay, after turning on the air compressor, locating the old airbrush hose, here I have mixed up some Badger Stynol Res. I've put it in a different kind of container because mine broke over the years. I've bought a pretty big container of it. Just wore out. Doesn't mean the primer's bad, just means need a new container. Couple test sprays. Get that out of the road. One of the first things I like to do when I use my airbrush, just a couple of little sprays on my glove here. Make sure things are running correctly. And then just gonna give some light sprays to break the surface tension. Nothing crazy. Different materials will paint with, like plastic and resin, in this case metal. The initial sprays will go on fairly thin. At least you should be spraying them fairly thin. And you won't get a good opaque coverage when you do that. You're just going to get a little bit. And if you see it splotchy or kind of running, sometimes you might be able to identify if you can get all the mold release cleaned off, like with the resin and here with the metal. So you can identify it then and get it cleaned up before you make too much progress. The other thing is if you try to put it on too thick, you'll clog up your details, and you really want to avoid that. The little models aren't so expensive, but some of them really can be. The real thing that you're protecting is your time investment when you do get into painting with them. So take this extra time now and really make sure that our piece gets the attention it deserves. Just spray a little bit of air now. Help dry things a little bit. See the edge of the gun here. Get too much there. It's not quite a hair dryer, but the airbrush can do a really good job, especially if you're being light with your sprays and speeding up the drying process. One of the cool properties of the Badger Stynylrez that really puts it over the top quality-wise for me is how well it shrinks when it dries. Now that property is also like it's kind of its drawback, because as it dries and shrinks, an area that you thought, hey, I've got really good coverage here, and it turns out you didn't, because when it shrunk, it shrunk. And so it really does lend itself to multiple coats. But I don't think anybody can refute the quality of the product. You just have to be comfortable with taking the extra time. Might not be the best solution for a full army. That answer might still be just breaking out the old rattle can and getting it done. But I live in Pennsylvania, and when it's not cold, it's hot. And it's usually some degree of wet out and humid. So humidity is really what messes with being able to spray the rattle can. So we get creative with the airbrush. All right, I think we got some pretty good coverage here. We're gonna let it dry just a bit. Might even hit it with a hair dryer here, and then come back to it. All right, giving this guy a little bit of time to dry. And something that I noticed is there's some spots in here that are really hard to get, and they're kind of not really taking the primer up in the recesses. Now we can do a big spray, but it's probably not worth the effort or the risk of damaging it. So just taking my paintbrush here and grabbing a little bit of the primer right out of the airbrush. I'm just gonna make sure that we get all those little areas. You don't want the bare metal to show through here in the end. It's a little piece on the sword. It's a pretty cool sword. You can be able to take some time later on in the project and really detail that out. I talk about not missing, but identifying some dark recesses and then you see some area on a big open area like the Cape. I never fail to miss something so obvious. Maybe even when you're on a grip like this, you catch a little something on the underside of a weapon like this. Okay. We might finally have it all sorted here. Yeah, a little bit more here. Solution to avoiding this is just to cake the primer on, but don't do that. It won't go well. All right. Not a bad effort. When we come back, oh, no, hang on. Just always something. All right, when we come back, we'll be establishing our zenithal prime here. We're going to hit it with a little bit of a highlight, which is always nice to help track the directional work. Of the directional work of the light, I should say. All right, so our pieces had some time to dry, and we got our airbrush cleaned up, and now we're going to go to establish our highlights. A lot of times you hear this called a zenithal prime or pre-shading, but what we're going to do is actually I should show this first. I use some matte varnish, and I mix it in with some ink. Now, in this case, we're going to be using titanium white from Liquitex. It's just my preferred color to use. White paint would be fine. The inks don't have a lot of body to them, so I add some varnish. I like the matte varnish because it adds some texture, and for those initial coats, a little bit of texture, I don't know. It's probably not needed, but it's what we do. I'm going to go 1-to-1 ratio with this, so just did 4 drops of the varnish, so we'll do 4 drops of the ink. If I was doing a bigger piece or more pieces, we would just do more drops and more drops, but at 1-to-1. Do a little more or a little less, it really does not matter too much. We all find our own way with these things. Just using an old paintbrush to swizzle that around. And titanium white ink is very, very bright, but it's also very translucent. And so the benefit of this is that as we work with it, it's going to go on fairly thin. Guarantees it'll be smooth. Shows here. And smoothness is what we're after. Now the other thing by doing this, we end up with a, white is going to hit something darker like black here, and it's going to not be pure white. It's going to go on very thin. I'll show you here on my glove. It's going to be kind of gray. You can see here where the larger spray hit, and it was more opaque because it kind of pulled up on itself. And so we're going to start farther back. We're looking 6 or so, maybe more inches away. And in time, we'll maybe get closer. But I might even start close, like 8 or closer, like further away, like 8 or 9 inches. Just start some gentle light sprays, a little dusting at a distance. I think on a piece like this, I'm going to start at like a 45-degree angle. So we're going to do our initial sprays far away from here and up, and then we'll come closer to the piece, and then we'll do from closer down. So these initial few sprays, we're really just trying to find the details and not really focus on it in any one direction, but just all around the piece. I'm looking to kind of bring most of it into the forefront. You know, so much of the initial priming it, making everything black, just kind of made it blend into the background, especially mine because I got a piece of black paper down. But I really just want to take everything from black and make anything that's facing us and up gray, but leaving the black in the shadows. And then as we get closer, it's still fairly thin with our sprays, but we're just going to be focusing less at a 45 and working our way more closer to a 90. As much time as you want to take with this, you can. You want to be more specific about it. You want to be less specific about it. It's all to you. How much time are you planning on taking with the piece? I'm not going to focus too much on the weapon here because probably going to repaint it in a true metallic. Either way, whatever I do finally, we'll highlight it anyway. What if I don't? As we get closer to our front of the piece here, we'll just try to pocket some light right here on the face and the hat. I think it's a nice little dynamic shading. Got a good shadow depth going here down along the tatters on the robe. Got a request to do some leather work, so I think we're going to do this in a few different types of leather. These patches maybe don't quite add up, so they'll look a little bit out of place. But maybe they're cut from the same type of fabric, and so if our initial piece of leather is 3 or 4 different colors, then the patches are maybe closer to 1 color a piece. Letting this dry a little bit really far, and then we can see that things aren't quite as vibrant as they once were up here. So do a big spray on my glove, make sure I cleared out any potential flaws. Come back through, resaturate that, give a little bit of air here, see if it'll dull back any. But I think this time we really fully saturated it with the white. Let me show this top of his arm some additional love. Yeah, because really the focal point of the piece is going to be right in here. I think we want to land that. No better time to start than the present, right? We get a nice casual fade back here without getting too vibrant. Maybe I'll bring a little bit more across the shoulders. A little bit more drama to the ripples. You know, when you develop this contrast, if you can stick to it, you really will add up quite a bit to the piece. One of my biggest struggles at this particular stage of my painting is sticking or adhering to that initial template we're developing right now. Being bolder with my highlights and shadows. Yeah, I think we have a nice pretty shade to go forward with. We're already getting a little bit of something here with the pants as well. It's good. It helps us, at least for me, it helps me determine what I'm going to do later, especially when I don't already have a good, clear execution in mind.